Coming up on Outlook, we have a full half hour for you today as we take a look at the aftermath of the terrorist events in Paris, the November 13th deadly terrorist attacks. We're going to meet a pair of French students who are going to share their story. They're studying here at Western Kentucky University. And then midway through this segment, what does it mean to send a bunch of students from America to other countries? And then what about those students who are in those countries? We're going to talk about that. And then later in the program, there's a lot of debate going on about bringing Syrian refugees here to the United States. We're going to meet the director of the International Center of Kentucky, located here in Bowling Green, at the end of the half hour. Stay with us. Outlook is next. Welcome to this week's edition of Outlook. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're glad you joined us. On the program today, we're going to take a little bit closer look at the terrorist bombings in Paris, a local perspective, if you will, as Western Kentucky University is home to 4 French students. 2 of those 4 are joining us here in the studio, and we're really excited that you're here. Victor Lecoffre is joining us. He's a senior majoring in architecture. He plans to graduate in 2016. And ironically, we didn't know this before we started the program, but both of these gentlemen hail from the same area of France. They're learning that today near Lyon, France. But they say it with much more gusto than I do. In addition, we are joined by Baptiste Maigret. Did I do okay?
Yeah.
A 20-year-old who's studying, actually, you're working towards your BA in business administration, but you're on an exchange. So when you get your degree, it will actually come from the university in France, as it goes. Thank you so much for being here. As we say, you've been here for a little while. You've been here for a short time as well in the United States. When you heard the news, how did you hear the news? How did you learn of what was happening?
I was with a friend, and another American friend texted me saying that events were happening in Paris, and I quickly came home to watch the news and see this tragedy, and then I followed from there in direct live.
And of course, the first thing you're thinking of is, do I know anyone that would happen to be in Paris at this moment?
Yeah, especially my mother is working a lot in Paris, and but I knew she was back where I live in France, so I didn't really worry about that. But she left just one day before it happened, and
so eye-opening, eye-opening for sure. What about you? How did you learn of events?
I was watching the soccer match, France-Germany, and I heard the attack when I watched it.
Did you wonder at that moment, so you're watching this soccer match, and all of a sudden, could you tell what was happening at that moment, or did you just...
Like, the commentator said, oh, there's a big explosion, but they didn't know what was it. And I looked at Twitter, my Twitter account, and on Twitter I saw that it was a terrorist attack. Yeah.
Yes. So you hail from the same region around Lyon, France, and so at that moment too, you probably had to think, do I know someone who might be in Paris at this moment, or what were your thoughts initially?
I thought about my cousins who live in Paris, but fortunately they were in a safe place.
They were safe.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I would think immediately, don't you want to call home, you know, and say, everybody okay? Yes? Did you reach out to your homes?
Well, I tried, but my mother was already sleeping, so I haven't had the chance to talk to her. And she didn't know before she went to sleep that happened, and she woke up with all those news and everything that happened in Paris. And she kind of explained how awful she felt about it, because you know you go to sleep
and everything's fine.
Right, exactly, and then you wake up in another world. Basically, I feel like it didn't really affect only Paris, but the entire world, you know, in a way.
You bring up such a good point, because you wake up, you go to sleep, everything's fine. You wake up and suddenly it's a very different world. How is that world different now for you as a French person?
I think the people will think about their security first of all.
Security, sure.
Yeah, they were maybe sometimes they won't go outside because they will think it can be dangerous. So that's a major thing.
Hmm. So now, same for you? Do you think when you go back to France, and when will you be going home for the holidays?
No, I don't really know when I'm gonna go back to France. I just feel like from those attacks, France is gonna change. France is gonna have more safety, I guess.
More security?
I would hope for that, and I'm hoping that that will never happen again, and they will do everything for it.
You know, and we heard your president today, French President François Hollande, talking about, he said, we are at war. Those are big, hard words to hear. When you're so many miles away from your homeland, how does that strike you when you hear those words?
Of course, you're affected, and you're sad, and you think about your family and your friends, and you can't do anything, but you're like,
Helpless.
yeah,
That's not a good way to feel, is it?
no.
No. Same? You feel that way?
Yeah.
Just kind of helpless.
Yeah, helpless. You feel very sad. You kind of feel like you're missing something being here and not being with, other French citizens. You feel like you're not doing the right thing. I don't know really how to explain it, but you don't really feel part of it when you should be part of it. That's how I kind of feel.
Almost detached.
Mhm.
Kind of detached.
Yeah.
Now, how have your peers here in America and others responded once they find out that, or they already know that you are French students? What kind of response have you gotten?
Well, I was really surprised by all the support we all got from the entire world. It was truly amazing to see that if a country got attacked, then all other democratic and countries that share our values are here for us, and it's truly amazing.
We talked about, before we got started with the program, with Victor and Baptiste, about the fact that they are young, they are in their 20s. They are the post 9/11 generation. When 9/11 happened in the United States, you were in elementary school. So you grew up in a world that knows terrorism. And yet, when you saw what was happening on television in your homeland on November 13th, how do you put that in some kind of context?
Well, when 9/11 happened, we were kids. I don't think we fully understand what was happening, and it didn't happen in France, which even makes this event even further from us. And I mean, the way I felt is that those kind of things can happen, but it's never gonna happen to us, French people. And last Friday, and even if it already happened last January with Charlie Hebdo,
Right.
It never been at that scale
That scale of
tragedy.
reality, yes.
Yeah, and it's
Now they
horrible
are.
to say that, but I wasn't very surprised when I learned the news because of the Charlie Hebdo attacks. It was only, I think, a few months ago,
Yes.
and we knew there was many terrorists in France, so it wasn't a big surprise. It's very sad, but we knew it could happen again, and it's going to happen again in the future.
So does this change the way you move about your world? Even though you're in the United States, this attack happened in your homeland, but we know, and from everything that we're hearing, it can happen anywhere at any time. So how does that change the way you go about your life, or does it not?
Well, I don't think we can really do anything about it. We still have to live. I think the first hope of those terrorists is, to stop us to live like we've been doing for so many years. And I think the right thing to do is just not to do that and just live like we've been doing for years. And yes, it's sad, it's scary, but what can we do as individuals?
Do you think your antennas, if you will, do you think you're going to be more attentive to things around you? If you see someone that may look suspicious or something that looks suspicious, do you think it's going to change you in that way?
Of course, maybe, but I think the best answer to give to the terrorists is to live normally and to don't think about that.
Live your life.
Yeah, we just need to live our life, and the world is unsecure. It's unsecure everywhere, and if we think about it every time, we won't fully live. We won't live our life. We will live the life they want us to live.
Which is fear.
Yeah.
Indeed. Thank you for sharing your story, and we appreciate that. We're going to find out more about this situation as it unfolds. We've been talking with two French students who are studying here at Western Kentucky University, Baptiste and Victor. And when we come back, whether you realize it or not, Western Kentucky University has over 1,000 students studying all over the globe. How did WKU react when they heard the news of Friday's events? We're going to find out when Outlook returns right after this. Outlook continues. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're taking a little bit, well, actually, we're taking a local look, if you will, at the events that happened November 13th in Paris, the terrorist attack. Earlier in the program, you met two young, very fine young French students who are studying here at WKU. And now we're going to meet some administrators who have a task before them. Since taking the reins of Western Kentucky University, Dr. Gary Ransdell has worked very hard to make WKU a leading American university with international reach. He succeeded, and so to date we have hundreds of students who represent about 70 countries who are studying here at Western Kentucky University, and then we have students who are abroad studying as well. So when the events of Friday, November 13th occurred, there was a lot of activity here at Western Kentucky University on the part of these two guests. So welcome to the program. We will not call you Kurt Cobain. We will call you Craig, Dr. Craig Cobain.
You can call me whatever you
us.
want.
He is the Chief International Officer for Global Learning, also Interim Director for Study Abroad and Global Learning. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
In addition, Tony Dye joins us. She is the Assistant Director of WKU's International Student Office. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So the events, Friday, you get the word. What happens at that given moment? You've got to go into action because you both work at it from a different angle, students studying there and then students from other countries studying here.
Yeah. I was actually in Chicago, and another member of my team was also out of state. So we were scattered across the United States, and our first thing that we need to do is we want to get a hold of every single WKU student that we know is in France, and then contact every single WKU student who's in Europe. Now, we knew we had no one studying in Paris, but and we had a couple in Lyon and other places. But what we don't know, it's a Friday night, how many of them are doing a weekend in Paris.
Yeah, they could be in Spain, they could be, people don't realize how quickly you can get
Right.
to Paris on a
So we had
train.
3 who were from Barcelona who had gone to Paris for the weekend, and we had, I believe, 5 who were in Great Britain who were in Paris for the weekend. And that's a little harder to hunt down. So we're texting and we're calling and we're Facebooking and we're talking to our partners who these students are going to school through because we want a confirmation of every single one of them. And it took us a couple hours. Students in France we did pretty quickly, but then when we started reaching out to everybody in Europe, they don't always respond. Young people are young people.
And so, yes, and then from your standpoint, what had to go into action?
I myself was traveling, and so I was on the road getting text messages and following the news, so it was quickly figure out which students we had on campus that may be affected by this, and then getting information out to them as far as how we could help them in this situation.
Now, there's levels of connection. You and I discussed this yesterday when we chatted, but you know, as to how, when we talk about international reach, WKU being a leading American university with international reach, as you alluded to, there are students that we place internationally. There are students, like we met in the first segment, Baptiste, who's actually studying here, but his degree will come from a university in France. Help us get a sense of that.
I'm not sure I followed your question.
Just that there are different levels of connectivity.
Yes, we have partner schools. We have private entities that we work with, and that's probably 1/3 of our students who are studying internationally. We also have what are called faculty-led, where a WKU faculty member takes a group of students to another country, and then we have students who are studying independently. So they're sort of like the students you met earlier today who are independent here at WKU. Our students are studying independently in a school overseas. And each is a different way we need to, track down those students. If they're through a provider, legally the provider has the first responsibility to know where they're at, to know if they're vacationing in Paris or they're vacationing in Stockholm. It's their responsibility. So we would reach out to those partners and say, where are our students? And they're doing the same thing, but they can do it more quickly because they're on the ground. They're scrambling to know where all their students are and saying, WKU students, we've already checked in, we know where they're at, they're fine. And then, yes, and then like the students who were studying in Barcelona, they're doing student teaching. So they're working with high schools and middle schools doing their student teaching experience. So we reach out to those schools. They know what host families they're living with. Host families told us where they were at and how to get a hold of them. And it's just chasing down young people.
Yes, but ensuring their safety as well because of the responsibility
Yes.
that you have. It's a different world. As if you joined us in the first segment, you met the two French students who are studying at WKU, and so aptly they put it, you just have to go on and live your life.
Yes.
We live in a different world now. So when you're dealing with students from, thousands of miles away, how do you put that in perspective? And I'm sure Western has a way of dealing with that.
Right, and so the biggest thing is making sure that the most important thing is making sure they know that they have people here that are available to them for help if they need it, and get them to those resources even on campus, if it's counseling or that kind of thing, or even getting them overseas to their home country if it's something that they have to leave, and go back to their family, always being available to provide that support to them. So making sure we get that message out there to them as much as possible.
Very important. Did you have any students who came to you, French students? We suggested that there are 4 on Western's campus as we speak that came to you with any of these issues and said, I want to go home, I don't want to,
As far as right now, no, they were all very appreciative as far as us reaching out to them and letting them know that, that we are available, but we don't have anybody ready to go back right now. But, as the world, these kind of things are happening in a lot of different countries, so we kind of are monitoring this and reaching out to students on a regular basis because a lot of our students are coming from countries that are directly affected by a lot of these events throughout the world.
We're going to meet here in a little while the director of the International Center of Bowling Green. There's a lot of talk about bringing around 10,000 or greater refugees from Syria into the United States. We have Syrian students here on the campus? Yes?
Yes, we do. And we have one international student, I believe, but there are some others that may be in a different type of status here.
And now I want you to chime in on this as well. We do live in a different world, and when you're dealing with students in general, and then you're dealing with students from so many different cultures, that's a real challenge. How best can we, as just human beings, as citizens, how can we meet that challenge?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the interesting things you said earlier with the 2 young men is, we talk about Gen Xers, Gen Ys, the millennials. The group we work with now are actually called Homeland Generation because they've grown up in the 9/11 era. So pre-9/11, when you traveled, you always said, have a great time, have fun. Now you say, travel safe. I hope you're safe. The whole culture has shifted. But this is the world we live in. You can travel more easily, information travels. This is a very good thing that we have students from all over the world coming here and that our students are going all over the world. We're talking a lot about Paris right now, but this has been happening all over the world. A couple, days before that, we had the incident in Beirut. We don't have students there. We don't have students in Lebanon. We don't have a lot of Lebanese students on our campus. It's kind of forgotten. It's important as we're living our lives, and I thought the young men gave great, live your life and do the things you need to do, because this is not going to go away. We can't live in a closet. It's important that we get accustomed to dealing with these things, understanding why they're taking place, and not at the surface Facebook level, but really understand the politics, the history, and the culture that's behind this. This is our future, and we need to be prepared for it.
Very well put. You talk about, not just Facebook, but social media became a very significant tool and has become in these situations. And it did certainly for our students from France.
Yes, as well. I mean, we posted stuff on our social media sites as well as the email. So they were trying to communicate in both ways.
Well, thanks for sharing that story and enlightening us on those things. We've been talking with Tony Dye and Dr. Craig Cobain. When we come back, we're going to find out more about the International Center of Bowling Green, which has relocated over 10,000 refugees over the last several decades. Stay tuned. Outlook continues. Outlook continues. We're kind of putting into perspective the events of November 13th that happened in Paris. And we're welcoming to the program now in this segment 3, the director of the International Center of Kentucky, Albert Banfu. Thank you so much for being here. So what people may not realize is that many, many decades ago, a woman, actually 2 women in Bowling Green, started something called the Refugee Center. As a result, and over the decades, we have been here in Bowling Green home to thousands of refugees who are fleeing many different situations in their lives. Right now, you're getting a lot of phone calls. Albert tells me he usually only drinks 1 cup of coffee. Today he had 2 because people are calling and wondering about the news, which is that there's talk that thousands of Syrian refugees will be relocated to the United States, and there's a lot of talk that some of them may be coming to Kentucky, to Bowling Green. So, clear the air on that.
Well, thank you very much, Barbara, for this opportunity. The first thing I will say is for the fiscal year 2015-16, we do not have any Syrian refugees in our pipeline. So I don't foresee a situation where we will have Syrian refugees in Bowling Green anytime soon. But bear in mind that when these refugees arrive in the United States, they are free to go wherever they want. So if, for example, the Catholic Charities in Louisville receive Syrians, and after about a week or 2, they may decide to move to Bowling Green or move to Ohio, wherever they want to go. So it cannot be ruled out that you may find Syrians in Bowling Green, but that's just how it is. But,
well, help our audience, Albert, understand how that works. You know, you mentioned that they might go to Catholic Charities in Louisville, and then at that point in time, once they're in the United States, they're free to go wherever they want to go. Is that how the International Center works? You get a call from Catholic Charities, or is it someone in Washington, D.C.? How does that work?
It's actually a very lengthy process, and that's something that the population do not know, and they have to understand how it works. What happens is at the beginning of every fiscal year, the president prepares a memorandum that he sends to the Senate Judiciary Committee with the number of refugees that he plans to bring into the United States for that year. And with the negotiation in the Senate Judiciary Committee, they come up with a number, and the president signs what we call the Presidential Determination Letter.
Presidential Determination Letter.
Yes, and that is a letter that states exactly how many refugees the United States will resettle for that year. And we work with our voluntary agency called the U.S. Committee for Refugee and Immigrants. And while the president is doing that, we as a resettlement organization, the Department of State is requesting for a capacity statement from us. And we prepare a document that says, we in Bowling Green, we have the capacity to resettle X number of refugees for this fiscal year. And we submit it to our VOLAC, the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. They take it to the Department of State that oversees the process. And the Department of State may either accept the number we've proposed or slash it.
Or say maybe you could take more, or
maybe say you could take more.
Who funds your office?
Our funding comes from the federal government. In
I
fact,
see.
entirely from the federal government, and donations from volunteers and other individuals. But
So if the government said, you know, they look at your statement that you can take, let's say 25 refugees, you can resettle 25, and they say, well, we really need you to take 40, they could send 40, but they have to pay for those additional refugees.
yes, but the government is also very reasonable. They will not force you to take in the number of refugees you don't have the capacity to. So they'll always want to work with you to see if there's a possibility for you to increase your capacity to take in more, because we have obligations towards these refugees when they arrive, and the Department of State does not want a situation where they will come in and will not be provided the appropriate attention that they need from us as a resettlement agency because we didn't have the capacity.
Right, I got that. Now, a lot of I could talk to you for a long time, but we're quickly running out of time. A lot of the talk and the concern, as you say, you're getting phone calls like crazy at the International Center, people saying, are Syrian refugees going to be housed here? There's a lot of talk and concern about that. But in your opinion, do you think people need to just step back a moment and take a moment and look and see what the government's going to do? Because, you know, a lot of Republican governors are stepping up. Do you think the vetting process is adequate when these refugees are resettled here? Is there a vetting process?
There is a very thorough vetting process. I know that the community is worried because of what they see in Europe. That's not the situation with the refugee resettlement in the United States. What happens is the United Nations High Commission for Refugees identify refugees that are most at risk and make proposals to develop countries to bring in these people. And when they do that, the United States will go in and say, out of the 1 million that you've proposed for resettlement, we can only resettle probably, we can, as a United States government, can only bring in, say, 500. And what happens is the 500, they get the information from the UNHCR, they go through the data that UNHCR collected, and then our intelligence agency and the Department of Homeland Security go through all of the necessary steps to make sure that these people are really people that need help and that want shelter. So, and when that is done, there is a face-to-face thorough interview done by experts from the Department of State of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And when that is cleared, they go through thorough medical checkup. And when they are cleared and ready to come into the country, they go through another one-time rush background check where all the dots are dotted, the T's are cut, all of that. So it's a very thorough process that is very different from what we find in Europe now, where refugees from Syria are just rushing in and the countries are taking them in. So there are two separate things. The
two very separate
yeah,
things.
They have to understand
Will
that.
you come back and share more information with us
Absolutely,
another time?
absolutely.
All right.
We've
been talking with the director of the International Center of Kentucky, Albert Banfu. Our thanks to all of our guests on today's Outlook program. Until next time, I'm Barbara Deeb. Thanks for joining us.